Hello and welcome to the south of France to the 20th DataCloud Global Congress. I am now joined in Cannes by Dean Nelson, Chairman and Founder of Infrastructure Masons, as well as the CEO of K2 Digital. And Dean, welcome to Cannes.
Yeah.
How many DataClouds have you been to over the years?
Not as much as other people. I've done about 5. So actually, this is the 6th for me. Yeah.
It's not bad out of 20.
Yeah.
I take into account as well, there was a 4-year in Chernihiv in the middle with
yes.
COVID.
I had people on my teams coming, but I could never really come here. So now I get to actually attend.
Yeah, well, you've been busy building the world. So, and to that point, actually, what's your view of the world? What's your current state of the industry analysis?
Yeah, it is a very unique time right now. We just, at Infrastructure Masons, we just released the State of the Industry report. And this is our 2nd annual version. And in that, we have 5 Ps. So basically, power is the #1 issue. Everybody's trying to find access to power. The 2nd is perception. This is about industry pushback on our industry itself. The 3rd is about people. We still have a pipeline problem when it comes down to the talent coming into our industry. And the 4th is planet. We're growing so fast, we're tripling infrastructure, so what do we do with that when it comes down to carbon intensity of the materials, equipment, and power? And then the 4th is data protection. That's brand new. That is actually limiting where we can land data centers and take advantage of resources to achieve the lowest cost, lowest carbon impact.
There's a lot of conversation around data sovereignty, data residency, and data nationalism. And data centers are becoming a political weapon as well. When you look into the US with Stargate, and Stargate is now expanding to other countries. When you look into DeepSeek in China, when you look into what's happening in the EU with France and Brussels. I mean, I've got questions on power, but what's your take on data sovereignty, data nationalism? And how do you think this is going to impact? Because there's going to be demand, but how do we build a global industry that's becoming more siloed borders-wise? Yeah,
and look, for me, I'm always Switzerland. So at the end of it, this is about digital infrastructure for good. It doesn't matter where it is or who's consuming it. How do we build infrastructure that's going to enable the world? It is really the great equalizer when it comes down to people's access to be able to do things. But one of the big things that came up in our last year's worth of interviews with over 500 of our members across 50 different countries was that the data itself, because there's data sovereignty, but then there's also data for large language models. And that's a very big difference, because if you look at the largest consumption right now, it's AI, the growth. And by the way, the numbers, we have doubled the industry in 2 years. We predicted this, and it actually came true. We thought it was going to be in 5, and then we would triple in 10. We have doubled in 2, and we will triple in 5. So we've added 80 gigawatts of capacity last year in the pipeline. Remember, we were at 105 gigawatts total globally in 2021. So we've added 80, and we're on track to do 100 gig this year. This is all different things, from everything from live to under construction to development, but huge amounts of money, and $215 billion worth of infrastructure investment just from hyperscalers last year, $250 billion on the ticket today for this year. So power is a big deal. Now, to go back to the sovereignty part of this, where you get that power, one of the big trends for us was, instead of us moving the power to the data center, we need to move the data center to the power. So where is that power generation happening? So I was in Saudi last year, and the first time I've been to the Middle East. Inside of that, I didn't realize the scale, the clean power, the cost. It was just pretty incredible. I'm like, why are we not doing data centers here? There's a lot of investment and opportunity, but there's not really data centers. And so we had conversations with our member base, and they said, it is a risk to put our data into another country that could seize the data. But it's different than sovereign data. So it's different than GDPR. It is, what do I do when I have 1.7 trillion parameters and I need 800,000 GPUs to train a large language model? That's a gigawatt factory when you think about it. Well, that's a lot of data. So if it goes in a country and they could seize it, that's a challenge. So the protection of that data became a big problem. So one thing that came up in my trip was this whole thing around data embassies and data safe harbors. And so we just went back, we had a delegation go back to this Middle East, and within that, they've actually published now data embassies and data safe harbors to protect the data, which now is opening up the door to land data centers in the middle of Saudi, Dubai, right? Neom, Oxagon, like just, it's incredible. So the movement that's happening is, that is the lowest cost, cleanest energy at scale in the world.
Do you think that's replicable to other countries in the world? Like, will people accept a data center as an embassy and store, let's say, an American data center in China? Will that be possible? Because we still have a Chinese embassy in the US.
Right.
we will be able to have a US data center embassy.
Well, this is why the embassy and the data safe harbors are important, because the embassy is really around governments. It's sovereign soil, so they can land things in there. But then you have, all the public companies. So that private entity really does need something else. That's the data safe harbors. So data safe harbors allows them to do the same thing. So you solve both public and private. And as you noticed, there was administration actually announced our investment within the US, within Saudi. And then we also now have things moving to Saudi is investing in the US. Well, they're the same thing. They need data safe harbors here. They need data embassies as we do over there.
Yeah, very interesting. It kind of reminds me of what Estonia was trying to do with the digital embassies a little bit in the mid-2010s.
Digital embassies, yeah.
Which was working quite well in the way they were doing government things and bringing other countries into Estonia, because they know they don't have the landmass for data centers. So what can they do? They can do software.
Yes.
So there was a very clever move back then.
And data.
And data.
Yeah.
But now with the power, that's the biggest struggle that we have. And picking up on that, so the International Energy Agency kind of estimates that data centers will more than double their power consumption by 2030. So there will be about 945 terawatts per hour data center power. You can say if that's right or not, because you probably know more than they do around this. What's your view of this sector being recognized as an electricity intensive industry? Is it something achievable? Is there any benefits on it? Some people say you can get like up to 75% cheap energy rates. Maybe we can scrap CO2 reports, or you get some tax discounts around CO2 emissions. Is it really like that? What's your take on electricity intensive industry, and could this become one?
So things are very different now, because we are on the radar when it comes down to utilities, because we can either be a grid stabilizer or a grid destabilizer. And because gigawatt factories are a very different load on the grid than our traditional stuff where data centers were kind of flat. This is spiking to 140%, dropping to 20, going to 120. So it's like this starting an engine 100 times a minute. It's significant. So the ability for us to go back and actually play, first off, we have to be a grid participant. So it's no longer just about rates, no longer about that. It's access to power, but we have to make sure we can actually stabilize the grid, which means that the data center providers, not just turning on generators, but being an active participant in ingesting power back, stabilizing voltages. So just like other large intense industries, now data centers have to play that role.
I was going to say if you're fearful, but is it an opportunity or a challenge if we become recognized as a utility? Because when you become a utility, there's a lot more regulation. Regulation sometimes kills innovation. Are we ready? Are we heading into that direction, or you think it's early to talk about it? We want another 5-10 years of freedom to do what we need to build AI.
So there's, in the power market right now, there's participating with the grid when it comes down to that. And we've already been playing in that space for 10 to 20 years. So if you look at it, Google is a registered FERC energy trading company. Google. They did that on purpose because they can make profit from it, but it also allowed them to get access to power. They can wheel power, and whether it's their corporate offices or the data centers, they suddenly have control. So then you have these other large players that are tying with grids at the same time. But if you look at it, that is not enough to meet the demand we have today, which means off-grid is a real thing. So generating your own power so that you can be behind the meter, not even tied to the grid, but literally consuming your own power. Those are happening all over the world at scale. I'm working on multiple projects doing that right now, from a gigawatt in Texas that's tapped right into hydrogen pipelines through ECL, to one with fuel cells using natural gas to actually generate 400 megawatts on site in the Silicon Valley. These two projects alone are
consume a lot.
You have, first off, aligning with a market that's hot, that doesn't have power. Well, they need to figure out a way to actually generate power. And then another one to align where we can actually have the cleanest, most cost-effective power at scale. Suddenly hydrogen is a reality.
Okay. You've talked about scale and unprecedented demand and how we build more and more. What's also changing at speed is the technology that we use.
Yes.
How do you build all this infrastructure and still can keep up with the change in technology? I mean, we've seen all the giants, Microsoft, Google, etc., Meta, all kind of stopping your projects to go back to the drawing board and be like, how can we build this for a longer period? But how do you stay ahead over the next 6 months? Because things are changing on a 6-month basis almost, 6 to 12 months.
Actually, even faster, it's weekly. It's incredible. So the pace of innovation with AI is literally a hockey stick. And we know this because, whether it's Google Notebook or anything with Gemini, what's going on with OpenAI, Grok, all of these are doing advancements like we've never seen before. That has driven capacity to increase and consumption to increase. But I think there's a really big change that people may not be aware of, which is you've got training, which is what is the big thing today. 90% of the workload is training. So that training, et cetera, we're actually using large GPU clusters in gigawatt factories to go back and train huge models like OpenAI, okay? But people are going to consume those models with inference. So when I have a trained model, I will go back and say, create me a press release about Yao on here, and it will create that in 6 seconds. That's an inference request. Generate an image, create a podcast, create a PowerPoint presentation. That's all inferencing against a model that's already trained. So if you look at the majority of companies today are not engaged that way. The largest consumers of AI will be enterprise companies, and they will be doing fine-tuning of their own models with their own data, doing inference 24/7. Which means 90% of the workload will be AI inference with enterprise companies. Today, the enterprises are less than 10%.
Yeah.
So this shift is big. Over the next 5 years, everything is going to change because we've been building up this training infrastructure, and we'll continue to do that, and it's important. But now how do you consume it all? It's just what happened with cloud. They turned up cloud, people went on there and started using it and creating money with it, and now it's a standard. AI is the same thing, just faster, with a faster pace of innovation.
So, based on the report that you guys just did at iMasons, do you see that conversation going in the right direction? Are people aware of this? Do people understand how it's going to work, especially on the enterprise side? Do you see any various challenges that might come from that side or even the investment side?
Yeah, I think the investment side is going to have to rethink their theses, if that's a word. They're looking at real estate right now, which is a very good investment, but then you have hardware, you have software, you have venture capital. So all of these players are looking in silos. But we have to look at AI as a system. So that system itself is, I'm building infrastructure to enable what? The training and inference of AI. For whom? The enterprise companies to consume. So from an investment community standpoint, I think what they need to look at is, I'm investing now, there's a lot of players in the market, this is a very good business to be in, yet what will the next 5 years look like? And so what I believe, this is my opinion, this is stuff we put into the iMasons report as well, is that we need the gigafactories, that's going to continue to go up. But now we've found the killer app for the edge. We've talked about this for 10 years. Edge,
now it's happening.
Right? And this is autonomous vehicles and all the other things, but in the end of it, there really was no latency sensitive application that needed to have data proximate to where the people were consuming it. AI is doing that every day. That means we're going to start to move the data closer. That means the processing is going to be there because the phones can't do it all, the edge can't do it all, the core can't do it all. So you're going to be using all layers of that, which means data will be close to people, which means we're going to have data centers where? In cities. So the metros suddenly are becoming important. And so while we may have hundreds of big, large hyperscale locations, we're going to have millions of edge now. And I'm talking about edge itself, right? Near edge, not far edge. Far edge is all the way back out to the towers, et cetera. This is near edge in cities right now.
Right in the lamppost down the street.
So even just a data center in the middle of a data center, or in the middle of a city. But then you start putting even edge stuff. Far edge to me is the lamppost, right? It's the container at the tower. But near edge is literally a colo in a city. So 5 megawatts works. I don't need 500 megawatts. I'm putting a lot of inference, capable equipment there to serve that local need.
And this is a bit of a side question because those data centers will not be as impactful as the bigger ones that we're putting in some people's backyards. How do you see society's take on data centers? Because it's become a big topic. I mean, we posted something on TikTok over the weekend and it went a bit viral, and the amount of questions and comments, and some nasty comments about data centers, because this is real world people talking about it. It's not people here in Canada talking about it. So the questions are completely different from what we're talking about. How would you go about educating those people about the benefits of what's been put behind their backyard?
So we're a little insular in our industry because we see it, it's great, and we tell everybody how good it is.
It's a positive bubble, that's what we call it sometimes.
But the reality is this, now you take Loudoun County in Northern Virginia, and that is the largest data center market in the world. That market itself has a whole bunch of pushback. It went from loving it to hating it. So we have an effort going on right now with iMasons that we also published. It's called the iMasons Social Accord. So just like we did with the Climate Accord of how we can unite everybody on carbon reduction for digital infrastructure, The social accord is saying, how do we unite on actually becoming of the community? And those words are very important. Not just in the community. I haven't like built a building and I operate there.
You're part of it.
I am literally part of the community, which means I have to listen to the community. So we've created the framework that allows us to be able to engage globally, regionally, locally, and hyper-locally. So in other words, what does that community need? So it's a matrix, a spider graph basically. It has economic, ecological, and social. Economic, we know what the actual impact is for taxes, incentives, or whatever else. Ecological, what does it mean to that environment, for that biome? And then the social is, well, what about jobs? What about education? What about sense of place? Are we building big concrete buildings that make it very difficult for kids to go play soccer in a, in a park? So how do we integrate into a community as a willing participant that actually is positively impacting that community?
And educating as well to the benefits.
That changes, because it's not us telling them how good we are, it's us listening to them what they need and figure out how we can now be a balanced neighbor, a good neighbor inside of that. That means that the data center community needs to consider and change to enable that to happen. That's our number one barrier to growth right now. Is pushback. Perception in there is one thing we have to address, so we came up with a framework to allow us to do that.
And I think that's where actually just networking, explaining to local authorities and even national authorities, but especially local authorities, explaining to them the benefits of a data center so they can go out to their constituents and explain that as well, slotted down the message, make it easy to understand.
It's actually both sides, because we have to educate, but at the same time, we need to get educated. We need to go into communities and say, think about it, Loudoun County is very different than Lagos, Nigeria. There are different places in it, and there are different people with different needs. So you may go back and do something in Lagos that's very different than you do in Loudoun. An established market needs more open space, needs access to things, where an emerging market needs infrastructure. So please help my roads, my schools, help me with internet connectivity, like the basics, give me jobs. We can do that every day, all day, because that's part of what we build. So it's really engaging the community to say, how can we be of the community, a good neighbor, that truly they become our advocates. Please build more here instead of please stop building here.
Okay, and then one last question on the piece of professionals, and then I'll let you go because there's a lot more things to do here in Canada. What would you see as the main skills that industry professionals will need to have in the next 5-10 years as we build this whole AI thing? How is AI going to change the job market for data centers as well?
So I would say that there are kind of a couple buckets here. One is we need trades. No matter what, it's very basic. We need electricians, we need mechanical, we need construction, because we're building out the most infrastructure in our history.
Jobs as well.
And by the way, those are not at risk from an AI standpoint. That we need people to do people work. But at the same time, I think us as an industry, we need to step back and actually decide if we're going to embrace AI or not. So in other words, right now, AI is going to replace a lot of jobs, but it will create a lot more jobs. So if you consider AI this way, everybody now has their own personal doctor, their own personal accountant, their own personal travel assistant. So at your work, you basically would say, is my team of digital agentic agents that I can leverage to do my job better? If you don't embrace that, you're going to be replaced by it. So we as an industry, and I think around the world, need to say, how will AI help me do things better and more effectively? And I can get more work done. That will accelerate everything.
Sometimes about enhancing your output as opposed to replacing it.
Yes.
So that's
I like that, hasten your output instead of replacing.
For now at least, for the next 10 years. Then we'll see what happens when the robots take over.
Coin a phrase, put that on a shirt.
I'll let you have that. One word to describe the industry in 2025.
In 2025? Explosive.
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 Dean Nelson, Chairman of the Infrastructure Masons and CEO of K2 Digital, thanks so much for talking to me. As for our home, thank you for watching, and do check our website for the latest digital infrastructure news from across the globe. At the Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.